Pitt now into May often usually has late ads through the transfer portal. They have a few scholarship spots open. Let's talk about needs in the portal that they could potentially fill. It's all coming up today on this episode of Locked On Pitt.
You are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Pitt podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. I want to talk about transfer portal needs for Pitt today, guys. And the reason being, we talked a little bit about wide receiver and how that is the obvious A1, and we can start there. Just kind of an overview of this and kind of a recap of what we talked about on Monday when we were saying, listen, this team needs wide receiver help. They do. The depth is just not proven. You want to get some other guys in there for Phil Dracovic. There are really, really solid options out there because there have been a lot of receivers that have hit the portal. So Pitt has options. They didn't go pursue Jalen Gill, for example, who has obvious Signetti and Jerkovic connections, which is interesting. But they did not go and pursue him. So now they're left kind of looking at very specific set of guys. But JaQuae Jackson is that number one guy on the list, obviously visiting Texas A&M right now. But he's a hometown kid. Pitt hopes to land that guy, man, because they have the upside to prove to him, from McKeesport, that they can produce high quality players at that position. It's Pitt, after all. And so we'll kind of see where everything goes. But Jackson has visited a lot of places. He's gotten offers from high level programs, but he did visit Pitt, and we'll see kind of where it goes from here. Pitt got in here early on him, and so we'll see if the hometown pool can kind of keep him. But obviously, Texas A&M, anytime you face them in recruiting with the robust resources they have, as well as the kind of ability to sell what they can do down there, they've produced a lot of weapons offensively in recent years, and Jimbo Fisher definitely has something to sell there in regards to that. So it's not going to be an easy win for Pitt. But if Pitt can win, I think that would be huge for them at wide receiver. But they just need more depth. They just need other types of guys. They need more there. Kanade Mumfield and Bub means to me. And then a lot of guys that it's a question mark. I like Izzy Polk. I like Lamar Seymour. I like Jake McConaughey. I like some of these guys, but it's nothing proven. Dejon Reynolds was injured, so we didn't really get to see a ton of Dejon Reynolds, and I really wanted to see a little bit of him up close in person, but we'll see that probably as the weeks carry on in the summer. But let's talk about other needs because we've talked about receiver. I want to touch on maybe ancillary needs that the people don't talk about as much when we are looking at this. So here's something that to me immediately pops out when you look at what this team needs in terms of provenness. I think this team could use some safety help, and I like some of these young safeties, but it would not hurt to get a veteran guy in there. PJ O'Brien, Javon McIntyre, Steph Hall, Donovan McMillan. I still wouldn't hate adding a guy maybe to that field spot to get into that competition, because it is a position that is so important and integral to what Pat Narduzzi does. If you are not playing at a high level as a field safety in Pat Narduzzi's scheme, you can see how much that would affect this team overall. And it does affect this team overall. And so I think we'll see kind of where that becomes and where that grows from here. I like the potential and I like the options they have there because they have a lot of good options there between where you have O'Brien, who's a lot of upside, good athlete, kind of just needs to make sure he's got that processing and the mental part of the game on. before he truly runs and becomes a great player. I like Javon McIntyre, as I have said before. That's my breakout player this year. I think Javon McIntyre, man, that's a dude. He's going to be great. I think Donovan McMillan also has a lot of upside, but that field safety spot, I think it's a question. You know, you lost Judson Tallendier too behind him, who could have been that veteran option. I think it's not a terrible idea to maybe go out and if the fit is right, maybe add someone. I think linebacker is still a position that you can look at and add someone at. This Pitt linebacker room, man, it's not bad. You have a lot of returning guys back into the system. It feels a lot more like 2020 than it did last year in 2022, where you lost, Phil Campbell, Chase Pine, Johnny Patrician, Cam Bright. You lost all these guys, but you're losing Boss. That's obviously a big thing to lose, but you're not losing the actual core of this unit. You lost, so you lose Voss, and you lose obviously as well Tyler Wilts. But what do you keep? Shane Simon's still there. So is Brandon George. So is Solly DeShields. So is Bengali Kamara. So to me, it's about the rest of that room. You got to get six guys in there, right? So is it Jordan Bass? Is it Kyle Lewis? Braylon Lovelace has apparently been awesome. Is it Aiden Henningham? I think there's a lot of options swirling there, but I think if there's a good veteran option that you really circle in on and really like, the Pitt staff should not turn that down. If there is a natural fit at the linebacker position, specifically to me, the star linebacker position, I would not turn that down. I think that is something to really think about overall when we are trying to kind of coalesce where that linebacker room should be. I think that's a place that still is like, okay, who's there? Is it going to be Solly? Is it going to be Bengali? Who's going to completely be there? And so I think that one is very important to kind of look at. And so I would say linebacker could be a spot where they maybe add a Wilts like player to that room and see kind of what happens if that fit makes a lot of sense. But they have a lot of young talent here now that I think they didn't have last year, with Lovelace playing at a high level and then Bass has yet to come in. So I think there's a lot to kind of work off of there. I want to keep talking about other potential needs they have, folks, but first, I want to let you know about FanDuel because, folks, FanDuel, it is the NBA playoffs now, and you can make a fast break to FanDuel during the playoffs because right now, new customers can get a no sweat first bet of up to $1,000. Folks, that is $1,000 back in bonus bets. You can bet things from three scored points, the spread, so much more, money line or not. And folks, there's great promotions every day. It's a safe and secure app, and you get paid instantly with FanDuel. There's no better place with all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's fanduel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, let's get back into these transfer portal needs and kind of where Pitt, to me, stands with a lot of these dudes. We look at players all the time on this roster and say there are obvious positions to me that are fine. For example, I think corner is fine. I think they have so much young talent at corner that they don't really need that, and they have three guys that have played at the very least, right? You have Rashad Battle, AJ Woods, MJ Devonshire, Marquez Williams, and then you have Noah Bigelow, who's getting a ton of buzz, Rylan Gandy, who's getting a ton of buzz. So that's a good position that you really don't need. The defensive line, I mean, you could if you could attract a star, but that young talent right there has been all recruited by Charlie Partridge, and you trust that man. Certainly on the interior D line, you have three vets and just one guy, whether it's Elliot Donald, Sean Fitzsimmons, DeAndre Jules, whoever it might be that steps up into the next role behind Bentley, Danielson, and Green. So that's something. But I look at a place where maybe they have their starters, but what about depth? And I look at offensive line. Why? Because you can never have enough good offensive line. I think that's something that people always talk about, and sometimes teams don't actually practice. And it matters just as much at the college football level than it does on the base level because this team has some really solid offensive linemen to believe in. For example, I definitely believe in Mac and Salvis. I definitely believe in what you have in Blake Zuvovich and Jake Cradle. You believe in the Brian Bear, Branson Taylor battle there. You believe in a lot of this. But the backups, you have Jason Collier, you have Terrence Enos, Terrence Moore, there's Dorian Ford who's now switched over. There's a lot of guys that are still a question. That is a room to me that could always be boosted by competition. There is nothing more than competition that can help you boost things to a certain level and degree than at the offensive line position. That is where the position just grows. I think you learn so much out of that as well. And Jackson Brown, who is a legacy recruit for Pitt, he went west in the portal now. I mean, could be someone that you look at to maybe add to this roster. He could be a guy that, he hasn't played a ton, but could be another young guy into this room. Any young guys you can add to this offensive line room. They were just like wide receiver, they really boosted this up, but there's not a real need for immediate starting help as much as there at wide receiver. I think if you can add a guy there, man, you do it because offensive line is that important to me. And Jackson Brown could be a guy that makes a lot of sense. You look at him and the actual interest that Pitt had in him, and it was very plentiful. Only played in one game, but he's an offensive tackle. He's a 6'5", 310 guy, really big dude that fits into a lot of what they like. Right? He's a good fit for what they really want to do. Son of Tony Brown, who's late. He's an NFL player, obviously played at Pitt as well. So this is a guy to me that could really fit the mold for Pitt of one of those younger guys, high pedigree, that could really fit into that mold. So I think O line makes a lot of sense to maybe add the competition, add a young guy there to really keep fueling it up. Outside of that, man, the offensive side of the football, outside of receiver and O line to me, I think you're done at tight end. I mean, after adding Epps, you don't really need to add anyone else. There, you have Carter Johnson, you have Jake Renda, you have Gavin Bartholomew. You're good at tight end. Running back, you added Derek Davis. Really don't feel like you need someone there anymore. You have Rodney Hammond, who's looked just like as good as he ever has. You have Sibo Flemister, you have Derek Davis, you have Daniel Carter, you have TJ Harbison. You have enough guys there to really believe it. So I don't feel like that's a place they need at all. Quarterback, again, don't really need one. You added two this year. You added Christian Veer. You added Phil Dracovic. You're losing Dracovic next year. Nate Yarnell is still there. And so, if maybe he had left and that was a question, would he go? Maybe that would have been a different story, but he's still here right now. The portal closed. So Nate Yarnell's staying. And so that is to me, something that doesn't need to be addressed because you also have Todd Diefenbach and you're going to be trying to get a guy in as well through the 24 class. So you're going to need to have something to sell to them, and that's going to be that Dracovic is leaving and that there's going to be an open competition next year, even though Veer is probably the easy favorite on that right now. I think already, though, you have it right now. And so I look at this roster and say, the big three spots I would look to add would be probably one, wide receiver, two, offensive line, three, linebacker. I think that's kind of where I am. Specialists, I think that they had three punters. Vanderhart entered the portal. I think they like what they had. They got Jeff York as a transfer as well. So that's kind of their transfer punter. So they've already really done that. So between York and Junko, who's going to be the starter there? Don't need a kicker. Ben Sauls is money. Long snapper. Believe in Byron Floyd. So to me, the roster is as constructed. A young roster with questions, and you're going to have to deal with it. And so I look at this and say, you have a roster right now, as presently constructed. That's a pretty solid roster. It's just a young group. And every now and then there's going to be, every 3 or so years, you're going to have a year where just going to have a lot of young guys, and you're going to have a lot of questions that you're going to have to answer. Um, and that's fine. That's the majority of what college football kind of is in terms of the transition process. And that's even more so in the portal. And you could fill some of those, but you don't want to fill them to the point where you miss out on seeing these young guys you recruited and coming in, and you see, promising guys like Javon McIntyre step up, or you see promising guys like Donovan McMillan. You see these young guys stepping up and into roles and playing at a high level, and you don't want those guys to be shut off from a result because you're just hitting the portal so hard. Now they'll add guys to the portal. I think if you get the right fits at a lot of these spots, I don't think there's technically any spot on the roster, maybe running back and tight end, that is not where you can't add people. But I think that this team right now has a nice, well-rounded roster. I think it's a group that probably still needs to mesh together. They have a new quarterback. Even if they're in the second year of Frank Skinner's offensive coordinator, they really need to mesh nicely together with their quarterback. The philosophy is going to change a little bit. You're going to become a little bit more tight end multiple. You're going to become a little bit more diverse in terms of that style. I think you kind of just have to fit what you have, and the portal is a nice place to add, but it's also a place where you have to learn how to gel very quickly. And so a lot of this group is going to be guys you have kept and guys that you have kind of kept in the wings for a while from that ACC championship team. As a young team, they learned what success felt like. We're talking about the new leaders, right? Where you have, Dayon Hayes, who played a little bit, but even Nakai Johnson and other guys, where you have these leaders that have experienced winning in college football and have seen it happen. And now it's their turn. You're sending the young guys out and saying, go. It's finally your time. And it hasn't been their time just yet. And so this is their time to kind of show out. And maybe you can add a few veterans, but I think, adding guys like Malcolm Epps, I think certainly Phil Jurkovich should be able to add guidance to this level. I think these guys hopefully have been listening to what Desmond Alexander, Kalijah Cansey, Eric Hallen, and Brandon Hill have been saying. Certainly what Kenny Pickett has been saying. And what all these guys have been saying. I think, this group has a lot of talent. The raw talent on the roster, man. I said this, back in 21, 22. Like, the raw talent on the roster right now is the highest it's actually been since late Wani days. When this team was ranked and maybe had some definite disappointments, but they are about as talented as they were back then. Like, the talent on the roster is all there. The athleticism on the roster is so good. Because you look at a guy like PJ O'Brien, right, who you have questions about, but the spring game, he was oh man. I mean, he was good. Like, this guy was balling. He's got that athleticism. The raw traits to be good football players are all there for these guys. Like, there are not bad athletes on this team. This team is athletic. They're going to really hit you with speed. They're going to hit you with agility. They're going to hit you with explosiveness. I mean, that's the type of team that they have right now. And so, they have the size, they have it all. And so, this team, to me, you look at it, man, and you can't not be kind of optimistic about what it could become. And so, we'll see what it ends up becoming, of course. But let's be real here. This group is a really solid group that is still growing, and the young players are what you can be very excited about. And so, who do you add via the portal? You add veterans, and you add obvious positions of need where maybe you have immediate starting issues. And to me, where you have immediate starting issues, wide receiver, I think you could do linebacker where you maybe have depth issues, and then you could certainly do offensive line just to strengthen that competition. I think that's one of those places where it's like, listen, like, you can't have enough good O linemen, especially in programs like Pitt. When they have had bad O linemen, it has been really when they're at their worst. And so, building an O line, keeping that continuity going over the years where they have strong offensive lines is going to be very big for this team. And I think that's kind of where the focus will be. So we'll see who they are able to add throughout the next few days and few weeks. They could add him late into the summer. It would be surprising, but we will kind of see if they could land a guy like JaQuae Jackson, Jackson Brown, or maybe some other guys that I didn't even mention and we just don't even know are even on their radar. All right, everybody. As always, thank you for listening to the Locked On Pitt podcast. We'll be back tomorrow talking a little bit more. Maybe Noah Thomason coming here for Jeff Capel, Pitt men's basketball. We'll talk about it. It's all coming up tomorrow on Locked On Pitt, folks. As always, thank you for listening. And as always, hail to Pitt.